Haunted. The House of Shadows. Deep in the woods, far from civilization, stood an ancient mansion known as the House of Shadows. The locals whispered about it in hushed tones, claiming it was a place where the veil between the living and the unalive had thinned, where nightmares were born and thrived. Over the years, the house had seen countless owners, but none had ever left. It was said that once you entered, the House of Shadows consumed your soul, trapping you in its twisted reality. The story begins with a group of 5 friends who, on a dare, decided to spend the night in the infamous mansion. They were thrill-seekers, always chasing the next adrenaline rush, but nothing could have prepared them for what awaited inside. The moment they crossed the threshold, the air grew thick and oppressive, as if the house itself was alive and watching them. The door slammed shut behind them with a deafening bang, sealing their fate. As they explored the dimly lit hallways, they quickly realized that the house was no ordinary structure. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, shifting and changing, leading them deeper into its bowels. The first to notice something wrong was Claire. She saw shadows moving just out of the corner of her eye, but when she turned, nothing was there. The shadows began to grow bolder, forming vague human shapes that mimicked their movements, taunting them. Claire tried to warn the others, but they brushed it off as nerves, until the first scream echoed through the halls. Mark, who had wandered off on his own, found himself in a room filled with mirrors. The reflections twisted and distorted his image, showing him grotesque versions of himself, skin melting, eyes hollow, his mouth twisted into a silent scream. Panic set in as the mirror versions of himself stepped out of the glass and began closing in on him, whispering his darkest fears. When the others found Mark, he was crouched in the corner, shaking uncontrollably, unable to speak a word. In the basement, the group found an old book bound in what looked like human skin. Against their better judgment, they opened it, unleashing something ancient and malevolent. The words on the pages began to glow with an eerie light, and suddenly, they weren't alone. The spirits of those who had been trapped in the house before them appeared, twisted, tormented souls who had been driven mad by the darkness that permeated the mansion. These spirits had one goal: to drag the living into their eternal torment. As they fought to escape, the house began to shift and change around them. The walls dripped with a thick, dark substance that resembled blood, and the floors creaked under the weight of unseen horrors. Rooms stretched and distorted, hallways elongated, and staircases led to nowhere. The mansion was alive, and it was playing with them like a cat with its prey. One by one, the friends were picked off by the horrors within. Sam was the next to go. He was lured into the attic by the sound of a child's laughter, only to find a room filled with broken, mutilated dolls. The dolls came to life, their cracked porcelain faces contorting into nightmarish grins as they closed in on him. The last thing Sam saw was a pair of tiny hands reaching for his throat. Desperation set in as the remaining 3, Claire, Sarah, and Jake, tried to find a way out. But the house had other plans. It began to whisper their secrets, their darkest thoughts, driving them to the brink of insanity. They could hear the footsteps of something large and heavy following them, but whenever they turned around there was nothing there, only the sound of breathing that wasn't their own. Sarah stumbled upon an old diary belonging to a woman named Eliza, who had once lived in the house. The entries became more and more frantic, describing how the house fed on fear, how it twisted the minds of its inhabitants until they were little more than puppets. The final entry was a plea for help, but it was too late. Eliza had already become one with the house. The last stand came in the house's heart, a room deep within the mansion that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. It was there that they faced the true horror, a mass of writhing shadows, a creature born of the darkest nightmares, feeding on the fear of those trapped within. Claire, now half mad with terror, tried to confront it, but was engulfed by the darkness, her screams echoing long after she had been consumed. Jake and Sarah, the last two standing, knew there was no escape. The house had toyed with them long enough. They decided to face their fate head-on, but as they turned to each other for comfort, they realized they were already too late. The darkness had already taken root in their minds, twisting their perceptions, making them see monsters in each other's eyes. In the end, the House of Shadows claimed them all, just as it had done to countless others before. The mansion stood silent and still, waiting for the next group of unsuspecting souls to wander in, unaware of the horrors that lurked within. And so, the legend of the House of Shadows lived on, a place where the lines between the living and the unalive blurred, where nightmares were not just dreams, but a terrifying reality. No one ever left the house, but their screams could sometimes be heard on the wind, a warning to those foolish enough to venture too close.